So that's important. Well, we're going to get into our presentation on Our Whole Lives, Human Sexuality Program. And I want to start off by talking about the need. And if you can think back a few years to when you were a teenager, you might recall that, well, it's not always an easy time. It can be a challenging time. Now, maybe some of this, you know, is so far in the distant past that, you know, but teenagers go through a lot, struggling with their self-image and sexuality and relationships, and just getting also just good, basic, accurate information. Because there's a lot of fake news out there. I don't know if you heard that. But, so we want to make sure kids are getting the right information. Now, I'm going to start off by showing a video. When we were talking about this service, this came to my mind, and going back into the way distant past. But I'm guessing there might be a few of you here that remember the singer-songwriter Janis Ian. Anybody? Well, when I was a teenager, Janis Ian came out with she had a hit song in 1967. She was only 15 when she wrote this song, Society's Child, which was a song about interracial dating. And it was so controversial, many radio stations wouldn't play it. Then a few years later, she wrote another song when she was 24 called At 17, reflecting back on her years in high school. And that's the video and song I want to play today, because I think that taps into a lot of what teenagers are going through, struggling with, you know, identity and relationships and so forth. Now, I hadn't really been keeping up on Janis Ian, but I was doing a little research on her. Come to find out, you know, she's still active, she's still performing, still writing, and didn't know this, but I thought it was an interesting part of the discussion or the journey that we deal with. I guess in the late 1970s, she married a man. They were married for 5 years, were divorced, and then I guess she wrote a book, and in that book she talked about it was quite an abusive relationship that she went through. Well, fast forward to the early 1990s, she came out as a lesbian. She met a woman and became her partner, and they were married, I guess, in 2003, and have been married since that time. So I just thought it was kind of fascinating, you know, her journey, and, you know, the types of things that people struggle with sometimes as they go through the formative years. So let's try to get this video going, and I think you probably remember it, a lot of you, but I think it's very poignant.
Okay.
You gotta hit enter again, Steve.
Say what?
You gotta hit enter again, but it's the lower left corner.
Okay. I was testing this last night. You have to be an engineer.
That's why Tom's correcting.
Well, it's the lower left corner.
Okay. I got to plug in the video part.
That love was meant for beauty queens and high school girls with clear skin smiles who married young and then retired.
Technical problems.
The Valentines I never knew, the Friday night charades of youth were spent on one more beautiful. At 17 I learned the truth. And those of us with ravaged faces, lacking in the social graces, desperately remained at home, inventing lovers on the phone, who called to say, come dance with me, and murmured vague obscenities. It isn't all it seems at 17.
This is
good. You gotta plug it in first.
It should be working last night, but I don't know what I'm doing wrong here.
Let's get on to using. I'm not seeing anything on the screen now.
I had it up there last night.
There we go. There we go.
I learned the truth at 17, that love was meant for beauty queens and high school girls with clear skin and smiles, who married young and then retired. The Valentines I never knew, the Friday night charades of youth, were spent on one more beautiful. At 17 I learned the truth. And those of us with ravaged faces, lacking in the social graces, desperately remained at home, inventing lovers on the phone, who called to say, come dance with me, and murmured vague obscenities. It isn't all it seems at 17. A brown-eyed girl in hand-me-downs, whose name I never could pronounce, said, pity please the ones who serve, they only get what they deserve. Your rich relation, hometown queen, marries into what she needs with a guarantee of company and haven for the elderly. Remember those who win the game, they lose the love they sought to gain, in debentures of quality and dubious integrity. Their small town eyes will gape at you in dull surprise when payment due exceeds accounts received at 17. To those of us who knew the pain of Valentines that never came, and those whose names were never called when choosing sides for basketball, it was long ago and far away. The world was younger than today, and dreams were all they gave for free to ugly duckling girls like me.
just insert a comment here that, oh, it's not on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay. This is so relevant today, except for one thing, is that it doesn't happen at 17. It happens at 14 or 15 these days. And I just see that so completely watching my daughter and her friends go through this. So those struggles were all still the same. They just happen earlier.
Human sexuality begins at birth. That's one of the things that the program talks about. But on a little lighter note, she talked about not getting Valentines. After the song came out, she received 450 Valentines from her fans. So, hey, if you're a famous singer-songwriter, it helps. I don't know what she's but well, I want to show another little video. This is two teenagers who went through the OWL program, and they talk about how they benefited from it. And this is only about 3.5 minutes, but I think it's a good little introduction.
Just want you to get some exercise, Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Adeline Fury. I'm Emily Johansson. We both go to the United Methodist Church of Davis on Anderson. And we're both juniors in high school, and we did OWL 2 years ago. So you may be thinking, what is OWL? OWL is spiritually based discussions on sexuality and sexual relationships, and ours focused on forming healthy sexual relationships, and we explored a lot of individual morals and how to make sexual relationships good for both people. So what goes on in OWL? It's a safe, confidential, secure environment where junior high or high school students, they're separated groups, have self-reflection and a lot of journaling. There are many interactive activities and discussions. We also use real-life situations, experiences to develop our own values and thoughts about sexuality. So in health class at school, you kind of sit around and you do worksheets and talk about, like, what is this sexual organ? And you just kind of learn about the different sexually transmitted diseases. But OWL is a lot more than that, and it's a lot more comfortable, and you can talk about all of the different problems that you have and like the questions that you have, and you don't feel awkward about it. Like if you raise your hand in health class and you're like, excuse me, then all your classmates are like, hee 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 hee, but that doesn't happen in OWL, so it's a lot more comfortable, and you can find out a lot more and a lot better things.
Yeah, it's really, I felt like in my public school health classes, they kind of told us what we should do and how we should do it, and like how to kind of think about sexuality. And a really valuable thing for me in OWL was that we were allowed to kind of discover our own points of view and how we wanted to approach sexuality, which in our society is often like a sensitive subject. So I thought that was really important and like a good way to approach it. Really.
Yeah, I also think it's a lot better than health because you do a lot more in OWL than you would in health, because in OWL you learn about like the physical and what goes on while you're having sex, or like, you know, the different kinds of stuff. But in OWL you're actually exploring like relationships, which is really important at our age because we start going out with people and like going to parties, because we talk about like how to say no, or you know, and we learn about all the different things that go along with the actual physical, what goes on.
We both thought that Our Whole Lives was a really valuable and important step in our sexual development, and we highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
For junior high and high school students, it's a great opportunity. Woohoo, yay, OWL!
Well, I guess we could have the lights back on. Thank you. Now, that's a little introduction there, a little sales pitch. I want to give a little more background, a little more about the scope of the values and the history of it shortly here. AL's lifespan scope encompasses 6 levels. They have materials for kindergarten through adult. AL's approach is comprehensive, going beyond identifying body parts to include relationships and personal skills, in addition to sexual health and behavior. AL addresses decision-making, clarifies values, builds interpersonal skills, and deepens understanding of spiritual, emotional, and societal aspects of sexuality, which can influence the decisions we make. Its 3 R's are responsibility, respect, and relationships. Our Whole Lives provides materials for each level and parent guides for the K1 and grades 4 to 6 levels. Also, there is an advocacy manual for sexual education, health, and justice with resources for communities of faith. The program projects many important values. Our Whole Lives affirm self-worth, the importance of sexual health, and healthy, safe relationships. Emphasizing responsibility in making sexual choices, the program is sensitive to being inclusive of different races and sexual orientations. In contrast to the abstinence-only stance of many religious-based programs, Our Whole Lives teaches that it is healthier for children to delay sexual intercourse, not say no to it altogether. The program uses 5 circles of sexuality, encompassing sexualization, sensuality, intimacy, sexual health and reproduction, and sexual behavior to help adolescents contextualize abstract or unfamiliar aspects of sexuality. How did AL get started? In 1971, the Unitarian Universalist Association devised a multimedia curriculum called About Your Sexuality in response to the sexual revolution occurring in popular culture. In 1993, when the United Church of Christ sought a sexuality education program, they teamed up with UUA to develop an updated curriculum. Using the guidelines for comprehensive sexuality education developed by the National Guidelines Task Force, a group of leading health, education, and sexuality professionals assembled by the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, the 2 denominations developed a research-based program that aligned with the values of both faiths. In 1999, Our Whole Lives was launched. Over 1,500 teachers have been trained, and 2/3 of UU congregations are using the grades 7 to 9 program today, which is the age group that we are hoping to have the class get organized, hopefully, if we can ever get it off the ground. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, one of the important components of Our Whole Lives is that the parents are involved, and there is an orientation session for the parents because children don't, or youth don't get into the program without their parents signing off on it. They need to know what the program's about. They need to know what some of the content is going to be, so they understand what their kids are going to be involved with. So one of the things they do with the parents is a little orientation and discussion, and I'm going to do a little warm-up exercise with you that we would normally do with the parents, okay? So this is just a way to get you thinking about some of the topics and some of the aspects of the sexuality program. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to read off a little question here. If it applies to you, you stand, okay? And be honest, be honest. It's not that personal. We're not going to ask how many Valentines you got. But it's just a way for people to see how much they have in common with others and how much maybe they don't have in common with others. And so it's an interesting way to seek out, kind of identity. But the first question is, did you grow up in Fond du Lac? If you did, please stand.
Like in the city of Fond du Lac?
There's like surrounding communities.
Or I know
Yeah.
surrounding, I'm surrounding community.
So am I.
So I grew up in Oakfield, I didn't go to school here.
You
Fond
want
du
to
I
Lac
go?
grocery
County?
shopped in Fond du Lac. Like, does
I know, right?
We could go to Fond du Lac County.
You know?
I'm like, I don't live in Fond du
Okay,
Lac
that's,
now.
we're not, it's, you're not under oath.
Yeah, we can get our yoga tree going.
One leg.
Okay, you can sit down. I've got to emphasize, you're not under oath. This is not.
Okay.
Is it going to be more difficult? This first one was very difficult.
That was.
Yeah, I didn't know this was that technical, but anyway. Now this one, okay. Tracy, I think I can,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
stump you on this one. Do you have grandchildren? Please stand if you do. Okay, a little smaller group there. How many have Facebook pages?
What was the question?
How many have Facebook pages? Facebook pages. Oh. See, I thought everybody did, but I guess I'm wrong. Okay. you can see. And plus, you're getting some exercise with this. How many people text? Text. See, most of them did. Okay, you can sit down. How many use Twitter or Instagram? Twitter. Now, I don't use that, but we've got some Twitters. We've got some tweeters here. We've got some tweeters. Okay, you can sit down. If you are the oldest child in your family, if you are the oldest child, well, if you're an only child, I guess you'd be.
Oldest child.
A lot of oldest. Okay, you can sit. If you're the youngest child in your family, you're the youngest. Okay, if you're the only child in your family. We got a couple. Are you a middle child? A middle child.
Of course, going last. I'm sympathetic.
Now, this next question is, well, it may be out of this demographic a little bit, but we're going to ask it anyway, because you've got to remember, these are parents of, have a parent living with you. Have a parent living with you. All right. Thank you for being here. We wanted to make sure everybody was represented. Are you any single parents here? There we go. Thank you. Have a friend of a different race or ethnic background.
I don't know how to answer that. Because I'm like Heinz 57.
Well, that could be a little, yeah, I guess these days there's a lot of mixed, whatever, races. Okay, do you have, anyone have a friend who is gay, lesbian, or bisexual? Okay, well represented there. Have a friend who is a transgender person. Okay, a little smaller group there, but we got some people. Now this is a little bit subjective, but you know, you're either your own judge. Got a good sexuality education at home. Hallelujah there. I didn't think there'd be too many. Got a good sexuality education in school.
Or no, I was going to say they still don't.
Anybody get a good sexuality education in school? Wow, got shut out there. Can talk openly with your children, and I'm also going to add grandchildren, about sexuality. Well, that's good. I think generations past it was not so great, you know. Now, let's get a few comments if you'd like to debrief a little bit. What was the activity like for you? How did you experience that? Were you surprised by anything? No.
I was very pleased to see issues of diversity and people who have friends in these different groups. How many people, which is a subset today. Oh, we're kind of a smaller group today, but how many of the people here have friends in all of those different groupings? It's always wonderful to see that.
So you can see that, there's a variety of responses, and some of the groups are larger, some are smaller. Now I'm going to ask some questions here. Now these you don't need to answer. This is just for you to think about. Just think about to yourself for a minute and just contemplate on these questions. What messages did you get from your parents or guardians about your own body, including the sexual parts? What messages did you get from your parents about touch and the human need for affection? What messages did you get from your parents about gender roles, how different genders should behave? What messages did you get from your parents about loving and intimate relationships? What messages did you get from your parents about dating and sexual attraction? What messages did you get from your parents when it was okay to engage in sexual behavior? What messages did you get from your parents about sexual pleasure? What messages did you get from your parents about sexual responsibility, preventing unplanned pregnancy and avoiding sexually transmitted infection? Well, to sum up all of those things, I guess we could say, what message did you get about sexuality from your family? Now, would anyone like to just respond in general about any of those? Just in general about how you felt growing up.
My family, we didn't talk about it at all. So when I was like 14, we went on a vacation to like a lake. And then I kind of hooked up with this guy. It was like the first time I had really dated. And I thought that if you French kissed that you could get pregnant. And this is at 14 years old. And when I told my mother, my God, this is what, she just laughed at me. Thought it was really funny, but just there was no discussion at all. And how scary it was then when you did something and you didn't know what the repercussions might be. And at 14, our kids today know a heck of a lot more than I did.
Anyone else like to comment on, sure.
I think growing up in a Catholic home just kind of says it all. But also the fact that my mom gets very uncomfortable about the subject about it because she doesn't understand it, and I try to explain to her, but she's very uncomfortable with it, so she just never listens. But yeah.
Okay, let me get over here.
My grandmother studied to be a doctor early on, and her brothers and her father wouldn't allow her to complete her studies, but she kept the books, and she kept them in a box under her bed. And whenever she took a nap, I'd pull that box out, and I had some pretty solid ideas of the birds and the bees by the time I turned 7. Thanks to the illustration in those books, which I wasn't supposed to be looking at.